Hi, I'm Brigitte. I wanted to share how important health is because you never know what's going to happen. The reason why health was important was because I'm an Army brat. Life was going really good until I hit at the age of 39. My OBGYN wanted me to have a baseline mammogram, which is recommended for women to start having them after 40. She had recommended this because she had dealt with stage 3 breast cancer unexpectedly, and I trusted her. You know, she always looked out for her patients, and breast cancer does not always run in your family. There was no history on either side of my family. So when I turned 41, that's when she wanted me to recommended to have another one because I had a baseline already. Was a surprise that I got a call that they showed a growth in there in what's called a DCIS, ductal cancer. I was like, what is that? It was all talking gobbledygook to me. So I listened to her and I ended up seeing a breast cancer doctor. He specialized in it. And I also trusted him too. I learned doctors who let you be curious and ask questions, right? He was also a researcher. I had to have 2 lumpectomies, meaning the first one, you have to have clear margins. And the first one did not have clear margins. And so they tested that little tumor they took out and it was considered kind of aggressive, but it was in my milk ducts. So I went ahead and decided they recommended I have targeted radiation. That was a blast. Not really. When my doctor first told me that I had breast cancer, I was really worried about my sons more than about myself because I was not expecting that because we did have a good, happy life in my perspective and they were happy kids. So I was trying to put on, I had to do research too and ask all these questions. What are my options and how am I, how long is this going to affect me? Because thankfully there's a lot of research done with breast cancer, but at the same time, Shannon, I didn't know this, but I was asking questions. There's over 35 different types of breast cancer. That's one of the reasons it's so hard to fix. Is that the right word? There's no cure for it. I did a lot of research and I asked the breast cancer oncologist what's the best thing to do. And he ended up doing some blood work on me too, to test my hormones too, because trying to figure out, because I kept asking those questions, how the hell did this happen to me? Because I was being healthy and exercise and ate well, blah, blah, blah. It turned out I had very high levels of prolactin, which is the hormone that makes milk. And then the second high level hormone, unexpectedly, was a high level growth hormone. So I'm like, I didn't even know, like I said, I was feeling overwhelmed and I had a lot of support. I talked a lot to my OBGYN because she had dealt with it too. And I didn't really talk about this publicly, Shannon, at the time, because I was trying to put on a brave face, right? Because they did not, the doctors are like, whoa. So they gave me some medicine to try to control those hormones, because if you don't have them in control, it could come back someplace else. So they put me on some medicine. I don't remember the name, sorry. It made me really hyper. And I did it. I was ready. I mentioned earlier that I was naturally got a lot of energy. I didn't need that. So it continued. My hormone levels continued to rise. Nothing was balancing. So I was asking the breast cancer doctor, what do we do now? So he ended up, it was like 3 years later, because we couldn't get it in control. 3 years later, he's like, Brigitte, let's do an MRI of your pituitary, which is in your brain. And that's when, like, yeah, that's cool. We'll see how that looks, right? And then they did the MRI, which freaked me out, Shannon, because I've never had one, especially of your head. I felt claustrophobic. And I was probably deep down panicking anyway. What are they going to find? Instinctively. So when they did do it, I told one of my good friends about it. Her husband worked at the hospital. He was like in charge of all I shouldn't say radiation, but all I can't think of the department, but he was in charge of all that. And within 2 hours after my first MRI, I left, her husband called me and asked me how I was feeling. And I'm like, this is, freaky. I'm like, I'm feeling fine. Why? And that's when he told me they found a tiny tumor on my pituitary. Then they found a big old tumor in the back of my head, which I did not know I had, because there were no symptoms, because it grew very slowly. And so your body accommodates to it. That freaked me out more than the breast cancer. And I knew it must have been bad when my friend's husband called to me directly. He's in charge of this part. So that's when I felt panicky then, because at that point, 3 years later, I was 44 when we discovered this. And then my sons were 14 and 11 again at that time. So I tried to put on a brave face, and my husband was very supportive, thankfully. And that's when I knew the doctors did not know what to do because of all this double stuff going on. And the kind of tumor that I have is called a vestibular schwannoma. It grows on your balance nerve, which, like I said, I never knew all this. But I was asking questions. The doctors did not know what to do with it, Shannon, because it is so rare. And I'm like, great. And then, so I ended up seeing 6 different specialists. And one of them was based in Chicago. I live in the Atlanta area. And he specialized in that kind of tumor. He was the one that I needed someone who understood this more than just random doctors, right? And I had my best friend from high school come with me because I learned, Shannon, you cannot go to these doctors' offices by yourself. And my husband couldn't come because someone had to be with the kids, right? And so my best friend came. And so she was there to listen and help take notes. And this doctor told me about the different options, and I will be okay because it was not growing on the brainstem, but it was pushing on the brainstem. And I did notice a little bit every now and then. Before this happened, I would be like well, why am I like pulling myself this way? Because my brain was trying to overbalance. And again, I tried to put on a brave face. So I decided to go find, I found a neurosurgeon here in the Atlanta area. He's recommended one of the best. And Shannon said, I asked him what he would do if this was with his wife in this situation, because being curious helps find the best options. And I said, would you do this surgery on your wife? He said no. And so then I trusted it because I could have been paralyzed from that surgery. So there was a new option, a technology called CyberKnife, which is super target radiation. We didn't know what the insurance company would pay for this. I thought it was freaky what was going on. And again, that panicked me more than the breast cancer. And actually, they learned down the road that is what was the cause of the breast cancer, was that tumor. I always try to look for the root cause. That's what I've learned. So then we went that route, the CyberKnife, which is super targeted. And the goal was to kill that, I call it the mofo. You know what that means. I had to be careful just because to get back into regular activities, I think I had to do 3 doses, like an hour each day or hour and a half each 3 days in a row. Because you don't want to do all that at the same time when you're, you just don't want to be hurt. So I had to take it easy. I wanted to know, what's going to happen with that pituitary one. We mentioned the pituitary one. That was not able to be controlled by those medicines that they gave me. So then I asked all these questions. So what the hell caused this kind of tumor? And what is related to that kind of tumor in your brain is radiation exposure. And it turns out they believe I was exposed to something like that when I lived near military bases as an Army brat. And it doesn't affect adults, but it affects children more because you're still developing. Does that make sense? I lived, like I said, multiple, not on, but near bases. And so who knows? That's why we got to be so careful about the chemicals that you're around too. Well, so then after that issue, I thought I'm going to keep digging. I'm just very, very curious. And it turned out I found a holistic epidemiologist. Epidemiology helps with your hormones and stuff. And he did all these tests on me. He discovered that I had a issue with casein protein, which is basically the chunk in a cottage cheese. That's what I'm sure you heard of whey protein, and then there's casein. And so I'm like, what? I'm eating that sometimes too, eating cheese. And so my body was fighting, because they tell you to eat cheese, right? They tell you to have milk. Well, it wasn't that good for me. And so that's probably why your immune system can only focus on one thing at a time, basically, to be successful. So I learned about that. I cut out dairy. That was hard, Shannon. You don't realize how much that isn't everything. I don't eat it anymore. People think I'm weird, but whatever, I don't need it. And what it would do, casein protein, I learned it takes your stomach at least 4 hours to start digesting it. That's why we didn't connect the dots. Some people, if they eat something, they'll have like a reaction right away. But no, this was like 4 hours later. Anyway, I cut it out and I felt better. And then I decided I'm going to continue eating better. And I got certified. I've always liked nutrition, right? Got certified to understand all that stuff better. And I learned that it's really common that people are getting cancer from eating things like dairy in the United States. And I'm not making this up. This is a common thing, unfortunately. But I think because I'm so curious and I wanted to be there for my son, Shannon, I wanted to watch them graduate high school, right? And this is still in my 40s. The brain tumor was found when I was 44. After the targeted radiation, we had to monitor it with more MRIs, like every 6 months, I believe, in the beginning, just to see what was going on. And it was slowly shrinking. And at the same time, they had to check my hormones because of the pituitary thing. Nothing happened to them. You couldn't target the pituitary with that. You didn't want to kill my pituitary. So my hormones were not stabilizing still. I'm like, okay, great. So Like, what do we do? And that's why I thought changing my diet would help. And it didn't really. At the age of 48 is when I found a lump in my armpit. In my armpit, which is weird. And I thought it was a swollen lymph node. So this is at the age of 48 and a half. I'm like, oh. So right away, I reached out to the oncologist that I had used, and he had sold his practice to another doctor. So he moved out of the state. So I went to this new doctor, and he was really kind too. He let me ask questions. That to me is so important to be able to ask questions. And so for this, they did a biopsy of it in my armpit, and they discovered it. Cancer came back, and there's a thing called breast tail. I didn't know that was a thing, but it was still as close to your lymph nodes. So I got a couple of different opinions, Shannon. I just want to make sure I was doing the right thing, get different opinions. And yeah, the best thing was I had to have it removed. And I decided I'm going to do a double mastectomy because I didn't want to deal with that again. And so my doctors, I had to have two doctors involved with this kind of stuff. So we scheduled it on my 49th birthday, a double mastectomy. And people thought I was crazy. I'm like, no, this is a new start to life. And at the same time, I'm so lucky. My husband was so supportive and my boys were supportive. For that double mastectomy, by the way, I want to back up. I mentioned running is so important to me. My boys volunteered to run a race with me 2 weeks before it because they knew I love running and we didn't know when I could run again. And in between all this, I was doing, some runs probably for my sanity at this point in my life. But that was the best present ever, is to have my boys, I'm going to cry thinking about it, by my side 2 weeks before Mom's surgery. And then at the end of the race, my husband was waiting for us with our dogs. So that was so helpful. And so it helped me mentally, like I got support, because you just don't know with this kind of surgery. And then after the double mastectomy, I healed pretty quickly. You got to be careful. I had to take it slow because everything is affected here. You don't want to have, I'm so lucky I didn't have lymphedema. I'm sure you've heard of that. Women who have that have lymphedema. Because they had to take a lymph node on each side to make sure it didn't metastasize, is that the right word? In negative. So all cool. A year later, I had to go have my checkups. I had a melanoma spot in the back here. It was my husband that found it. After the surgery, I had to have chemo. It was so complicated because they called me, Shannon, a zebra among horses. The doctor did not know what to do with me because I ate right and I exercised. I was really active. But then it was this, again, I was trying to heal myself. And I think it did help by being really focused on what I was eating. But at the same time, where the hell is this melanoma? How did this happen? Thank God my husband found it. But one of the side effects when you do have chemo is you have sensitive skin. And I was putting sunscreen on, but I was probably doing it after I put a shirt on, It was just tiny little things you got to do. And again, my beacon of hope, I have a sign in my house that says hope in it. I would light it up sometimes. I just needed to see that. It was my sons. And then my supportive husband, right? That was just, and doing all that, they were still in school. And one was involved with travel hockey, trying to go through all this chemo. That was not fun. But then at the same time, after this brain tumor stuff and the second breast cancer stuff at the age of 49, my hormones were still doing this with my pituitary. So again, I talked to my OBGYN a lot, and she recommended, let's just do a tetanus booster shot. I'm like, why? And she said, because they're repurposing that. And I'm like, for brain tumors. And I'm like, sure, whatever. Right? And then a year later, after that shot, Shana, my hormones were normalized. All been normal since then. And the brain tumor shrunk even more and it's completely dead. It's not going to ever disappear, but it's completely dead. And it shrunk to a size that, so I still now I have to go get my checkups, it's so important. And that's another thing about self-care is getting your checkups. People push them off. And if you do have an issue like I had, to find it sooner rather than later. That's what, trying to be the role model for people. And that's when I just I got to share. That's when it was my sons, by the way, they said, Mom, share your story after the brain tumor was found. So that gave me the bravery of them, their encouragement. They encourage mom. I'm 59 now and I feel great. I'm still able to run. I did have to have physical therapy. I have to be realistic because it's all that surgeries and all that crazy. People don't realize how it can affect your posture and your muscles. And I learned, Shannon, that the scar tissue was one of the side effects of that radiation I had in 2006 when I was 41. It never goes away. That's why I got to do lots of stretches, right? And you've got to I've had to have physical therapy 3 times since 2006 just because it affects things. And that's why people are just so surprised how healthy I am. That's because I make it a priority. Again, I see my family. I want to be there for them and being a good role model. And I don't complain. And I definitely highly recommend to see doctors who only let you ask questions, because I did meet a few that just gave me like a pain pill or something. Like, no, I just knew instinctively what I have to find the root cause. And I'm so glad it's this OBGYN who recommended, and she's doing good, by the way. She's the one that had stage 3 breast cancer, over 18 years ago, and she's doing well. So I was following her example as well, too. I met my husband when I was a college student. I met him by a military base, by the way. He knew my stepfather. He was just a really good protective person. I just knew right away. And he was very encouraging. He knew I liked to run, so he encouraged me to run. And we just were so opposite, though, but that we connected. We have some things in common. We both like to stay active. He was a hockey player and I'm a runner. So you think about it, they're both kind of sprinting, right? And then we got married, I think 4 years after we met. And he very supported me to continue doing what I did, being active. And I've always ate really well too. That's something that instinctively wanted to always eat vegetables. My mom used to call me the rabbit because I always asked for vegetables, anyway. And then we had our sons when I turned, my first one when I was 30. And the other one when I was 33. And that's something I tried to ingrain in them is eating good, eating healthy. And they thought that was kind of cool too. That's what they were used to. So I tried to ingrain that in their lifestyles too. And they do like to eat a mixture of vegetables too. They like that. They know how important it is. And then I knew, again, then we got them involved in sports, had them try different things. They weren't as hyper as maybe me or my husband were. I don't know. Who knows? But they were very active as well. And we also ingrained in reading. I think reading is good for your brain too. We read to them all the time. So they're used to having books around them and used to moving around and used to trying to eat healthy. And so that led up to my 40s. They were, like I said, it started when I had my first son at 30, and then 41 is when my first unexpected health issue happened.